Good morning, everybody. We don't really think much about turning on the electricity, do we? But on this date in 1883, January 19, was the first use of overhead lighting wires in Roselle, New Jersey. Thank you, Thomas Edison. By the way, I'm a few miles from my house at a railroad bed associated with a man who went down in the Titanic. So it was never finished, but the trail is still here. It's through the woods, and it's called the Grand Trunk Trail. The word electricity comes from the Greek word for amber, the fossilized tree resin that you all know about. And if you rub amber, it will attract things like feathers with static electricity. The ancient people also knew about electric eels, electric fish. They thought that if you had a headache, maybe getting a shock from an electric eel might help cure you. In the 1750s, Ben Franklin did his experiments with electricity. A damp cord had a key on it, and lightning sent the current down the string. In the late 1700s, Luigi Galvani started experimenting with electricity by shooting it through things, and this is where we get our word galvanized. And one thing he loved to shoot electricity through were frog muscles, and he would notice how the legs would twitch after an electronic current was applied. This really fascinated people, and they wondered maybe electricity could bring the dead back to life. And this is part of the context of Mary Shelley's book, Frankenstein, which came out only a few years after Galvani was doing some of his experiments. So you can see how those fit together. Michael Faraday invented the electric motor in the 1820s. He also did all kinds of things with electricity. And it was about 20 years later that Thomas Edison was born. So Edison was born at a time when people were thinking about electricity and trying things with electricity. Here's where he was born, in Milan, Ohio. And one of his first jobs was to work as a telegraph operator on the railroad. So early on, he got exposed to electricity. He got exposed to metal machinery. He also did experiments on various things. And his first patent was for an electric vote counter, pictured here. He ended up having over 1,000 patents by the time he died. So this got him a little bit of money, but what really established him was when he did a telegraph reader that could read 4 messages simultaneously, 2 in one direction and 2 in the other at the same time. And this established him financially, so he felt he was able to set up his own research lab at Menlo Park, New Jersey, pictured here. It's about 35 miles south and west of New York City, and it was very much in the countryside in New Jersey at the time. But it was a research lab. He had all kinds of people there working on things. They would just try stuff out for the fun of it. So he did work by himself, but this image of Thomas Edison as the lone genius is partly true, but it's partly not true because he did have a whole group of people working with him. He's probably most famous, at least in those early days, for the phonograph. This was in 1877. He did a little bit of work on the Bell telephone too, but he got his electric light going in the late 1870s. He did not invent the electric bulb. Other people had worked on it. There were all kinds of attempts at different filaments, but he did get the patent, and on this date, 19th of January in 1883, the first overhead electric wires were used for lighting. Now, another genius at the time was George Westinghouse. And where he and Edison really disagreed was on current. Alternating current versus direct current. Batteries have direct current. The current you have in your house when you plug in a light is alternating current. And Edison felt really strongly about direct current, Westinghouse on alternating current. And GE, which was partly started by Edison, actually removed him from the board because they disagreed with him on this AC-DC controversy. So lighting, pretty common. We just turn on the switch without thinking about it. But Thomas Edison, one of the major players in that story.